Hi, it's me JD and welcome back to my channel. This video will be all about vellum techniques. Vellum is a very popular material used in handmade cards and wedding invitations, and so I thought I would share with you some creative techniques to do with this vellum paper. Before we begin, be sure to hit the subscribe button and we'll jump right into the first technique and card. A common dilemma when working with vellum is how do you adhere this to your project without seeing any messy glue or adhesive or tape. One solution I found is to use brads or paper fasteners. They come in a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes, and they're pretty affordable for your paper crafts. For this first idea, I cut up some clear stamps so they'd be easier to line up straight. I put my vellum in my stamping tool. I'm going to swing the door over and pick up those stamps. Then, using a anti-static powder tool, I'm using a pouch today instead of my normal brush because I'm working with vellum. The brush has some bristles that might scratch the surface of my vellum, so that's why I went with the pouch. When stamping on vellum, I find it's best to do Versamark ink and heat embossing. If you use dye ink or pigment ink, it might wipe off or fade. So that's why I'm going to be doing mainly heat embossing for most of these cards today. I'll carefully take the vellum out of the stamping tool and then I'll pour some embossing powder over it, making sure to cover all of the surfaces I inked. And that's pretty enough on its own, but we do have to melt this down. So with a very hot heat tool, I'm going to melt this powder from the back and the front to minimize the warping on vellum. Since vellum is so delicate, it does warp very easily, so you'll have to be mindful of that when you're heat embossing. Now, you can punch a hole with any regular hole punch, but I wanted to be a little fancy today. I wanted a very small little brad that needed a very small little hole, so I'm taking out my Crop-A-Dile. Funny story, I thought it was pronounced Crop-A-Dile this whole time, but then I watched a video and it's actually pronounced Crop-A-Dile. But I like Crop-A-Dile better, so I'm going to go with Crop-A-Dile. So using your Crop-A-Dile, it has these measurements on the top and bottom so you can align your paper to the exact point that you need it to, like, centimeter, half inch, quarter inch, what have you. I'm going to be attaching these two panels together, and I found that the quickest way to do this is just stick a piece of Post-it tape to connect them together and make sure they're straight, and then just punch one hole through them at the same time. So you just make sure that, you want your paper to be half an inch from the edge or quarter inch, what have you. And then you just simply slide your paper in there and squeeze the little puncher, the Crop-A-Dile. And there you have a nice tiny little hole for a very posh metallic brad that I have. And then you open up the back and take off the paint. And now your vellum is adhered without any messy adhesive showing. The Crop-A-Dile is not just a fancy hole puncher. I got it mainly because it sets eyelets. And eyelets can be used in all kinds of interactive cards and techniques. And so I thought this would be perfect for an invitation. I've seen plenty of these kinds of wedding invitations where a piece of vellum is laid over top a cardstock panel and it's held together with an eyelet, and it just has this really cool effect to it. So I thought I would show you how to DIY your own invitation like that. I'll be doing some more heat embossing, this time with some gold glitter embossing powder. And I use a save the date stamp here, but you can use and create your own sentiment or RSVP details if you want. You just make it up on your word processing software, print out your work on a laser printer with some laser printer friendly cardstock or paper or vellum, and then you could foil it and then attach that piece to a piece of cardstock. But since I'm using a stamp, you can just attach the whole panel to another note card. What I'm doing here is I'm just making precise measurements as another way to help line up your paper. But I also prefer the Post-it tape method as well, just because this is a demonstration. And so I'll go back to my Crop-A-Dile, punch a hole, and then I'll pick out one of those eyelets and place it within that hole. And I'm going to try to angle this so you can see it, but what the Crop-A-Dile does is that it sets the proper block setting on the chomper piece, and according to your eyelet, you know, you choose the right block setting. And what the Crop-A-Dile will do will crunch and set the eyelet for you so that you know it's not going to go anywhere. I'm going to try to get the right angle to show you this, but you stick the eyelet within there and make sure it's in that proper block. Squeeze, and now your eyelet is set from the back. And it works like a brad is just see-through now, which I think is a totally cool and stepped-up element to add to your paper crafts. A common way to work with vellum is to make die cuts out of them. First, a popular technique for vellum is to color the back of it to change the color of your vellum paper. In my case, I'm making it this bluish gray color. I'm going to place this on my die cutting machine with the paper side up, make my die cutting sandwich, and run this through my die cutting machine. I've cut a bunch of these leaves out in the gray color and in just plain vellum. And my plan to adhere all these vellum pieces neatly is to use a Xyron sticker maker. Now, is the adhesive on this 100% clear or invisible? No, it's more like 95%, 97%. I mean, at first glance, you probably couldn't tell. At second glance, you probably couldn't tell. And if you were maybe another paper crafter and looking at this really closely, then you'd be able to tell that there's some sticky adhesive on the back. In any case, I think that this doohickey probably gets the best results as far as adhering clear elements or vellum elements or acetate elements. So what you really have to do is you brush down or burnish on top of your Xyron stickers to make sure all of the adhesive is stuck on the back of your die cuts, and then you carefully peel them up because vellum is very, 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 very delicate and it can tear easily, especially with this much adhesive on the back. I'm going to carefully peel and stick the rest of my leaf stickers onto my card panel until they're in a very nice arrangement on the corner. And it doesn't matter if they're hanging off the edge because I can always just trim that off later. So once they're all stuck down there, I'm going to glue my die cut sentiment, which says birthday. It says birthday wishes, but it's also a very delicate die cut. So for that, I want to use liquid adhesive just so I can have a little bit of wiggle room to arrange my sentiment or curve it if I need it to. And I can't forget the dots over the eyes, and this card is pretty much done. Like I said, I'm going to trim off all those excess pieces hanging off the edges, and I'm going to add some gems to this card just to help perk it up a little, and this card is finished. Another common paper craft technique you see with vellum, besides overlays, is to create a window or shaker card with them. So for this, I'm going with this very pretty leafy die and cutting a window into my card panel. And then I decided I want to step this up a notch. I'm going to cut the same shape into a black card panel, run that through my die cutting machine. And then I got out a circle die, which was a little bit bigger than the leafy window frame. And what that does, it will create a new frame for this window. As you can see, it's outlined in black now, which I think adds a really striking detail. And instead of layering it directly on top, I'm going to offset it a little just to add more dimension and interest to this window. Like there's multiple leaves coming out. And you can certainly add vellum behind this and just leave it as a window card. But you know, your girl loves a shaker card, so that's what we're gonna do. I'm going to put some double-sided tape on the back of this window frame, peel off all of the backing, and then attach my vellum panel to this frame piece. I'm going to double up on my foam tape because I like my shakers to shake. To save on supplies, I just cut this tape in half down the middle and use 1/4-inch pieces. Then I will build my shaker well for all of my sequined and gem bits, and I'll add some additional doubled up foam tape to the rest of the panel so it's a nice level surface when this goes through the mail. I'm going to use black and silver gems because this card is looking classy, so I'm going to keep it classy. that I've got enough gems in there, I have to then carefully and gently lower this front window panel over the top of all those shaker bits, and I'm loving the frosted look that this vellum gives to this shaker card. It is fabulous, it is posh, it is oh so chic. It also needs a sentiment, so I've die cut the word happy along with a shadow in white, and then I've added my sub-sentiment, and this happy birthday card is finished. This next technique is somewhat inspired by Jennifer Maguire and her Vellum Overlay cards. It's sort of the same concept, but with my personal twist on it. So I have my front card panel in my stamping tool. I'm going to ink up this large Gardenia stamp with some Copic friendly ink. I'm going to stamp the sentiment along with it to save time. It looks like I missed a spot with my massive magnet in the way, so I'm just going to exchange that for a tinier magnet and restamp this. Again, love that I have a stamping tool because it makes this process so easy and I don't have to start over. I'm going to wipe off the excess black ink, and then I'm going to place a vellum note card into my MISTI. First I want to make sure that my front panel is completely dry, and I'm going to place it directly over my front card panel and stick my magnets on. This is because I want to stamp the vellum note card the same way I did with my white note card panel. And it's always a best practice to run an anti-static tool over your surface if you're going to be doing some heat embossing, which I am. So I'm going to ink up this stamp in some Versamark ink, and then I'll swing the door over and stamp my vellum piece, and hopefully everything lines up the way I want it to. I'll take this vellum note card out, and next I will pour this really pretty metallic rose gold embossing powder over the stamped image. I got some vellum in some spots I didn't want, so I'm just going to flick that away with a small paintbrush. I'm going to melt this powder with a heat tool that's nice and hot from the front and the back side to help prevent as much warping as possible. Next, I'm going to somewhat fold it over my white panel to get an idea of where I want the score line to be. You know how sometimes your trimmer could be off, or more likely you are off, and so when I say you I mean me, and so I wanted to just get an idea of where to put the score line so both my panels match up. To adhere this vellum, I'm going to line up both pieces, and on the back of the white panel, I'm just going to run my tape runner, and I don't know why it's working. Oh, because it's upside down. And put that all over that back vellum side of the note card. I will fold that vellum over, and the adhesive should pick up that white panel. I want the front side of the vellum note card to just hang freely because I think that it's a really cool effect. And then I attach this entire piece to an entirely new white note card, and this vellum overlay card is finished. For a nice quick handmade card or a DIY invitation, you can also make vellum frames. This is very easy to DIY if you have a die cutting machine and a really nice metal die. I have this leafy frame die that I ran through my die cutting machine. Now I'm just putting some liquid adhesive along the edges, and then I'll stick this onto the front of my card panel, which I already heat embossed my sentiment on. And I will carefully lay this vellum frame over top. And to hide all of that adhesive, I'm going to use the same technique I did on the shaker card, where I die cut the same frame on another piece of opaque cardstock, one you can't see through, and just lay that over top. And this makes for a very quick and easy but beautiful card that has this really cool vellum dimension behind it. To really step up your handmade cards and DIY invitations, you can also try making a vellum panel card. This starts by making a vellum note card, which I scored right down the middle with my scoring board. To help give this card some stability, I'm going to create 4 diagonal cardstock panels, which are cut all of the same way. So I start with one, and then I use a pencil to trace another piece and then cut that as well until I have 4 of the same pieces. Then, using my dot runner or double-sided tape or liquid glue if you want, I'm going to attach each of these 4 cardstock panels to my vellum note card so that they serve as a front and back side to each of the sides of my vellum note card. 2 of the cardstock panels just serve to make things pretty from the front, and the other 2 are just used to hide the adhesive from the back. Once your recipient opens it, or if they want to look at the back of the card, they will see a very finished card without any yucky adhesive. Speaking of adhesive, I'm going to put some liquid glue on this beautiful leaf die cut that I got recently, and I'm only going to put glue on the bottom half because the bottom half is what is going to attach to the cardstock panel. If you have any glue peeking out over the edges, just dab that off with a paper towel, and there's enough adhesive on this branch to hold it to the bottom half. I don't think I have to worry about the top half falling off. And to make your die cut sentiment stand out, you can always cut the shadow piece out of vellum. This is a great subtle way of adding interest to your die cut sentiment without detracting from the background. I'll snip off the excess, and I love that this vellum panel card has some stability with the addition of those cardstock panels, but still has that frosted look of vellum. A cool way to dress up your card or invitation is to make a vellum pocket. First, I'm going to make the insert of the pocket. I'm going to trim down the sides of my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 panel to about 3 3/4. And then I'm attaching some die cut balloons to the vellum panel. And if you notice, I'm also making sure to glue down some balloons along the sides and the bottom edge. That's very important. So I'm going to set that aside to dry, and I'll work on the insert once again. I heat embossed my sentiment in some really pretty silver glitter embossing powder. And now that the front vellum panel with all of the die cut balloons is dry, I'm going to just snip off all of the balloons that are hanging off. And then using some very skinny score tape, I'm going to put tape along the sides and bottom of this vellum panel, but not the top. We need to leave the top open for the insert. And you can see why I put balloons on the sides and bottom. I wanted to camouflage this adhesive as much as possible. I'm going back to the insert to trim off a little bit of the bottom so that this insert can fit nicely in my vellum pocket. Okay, so now it's time to peel off the backing of this double-sided tape, and it's being persnickety right now. I can never get it on the first try. You need some nails to work in paper crafts, I tell ya. Okay, so now that the backing is all peeled off, I'm going to take that second vellum panel and adhere it to my front panel, and it creates this nice vellum pouch for me to put my insert in. But I realized that, it's going to be hard to pull out the insert without a little notch. So I DIY'd my own notch by tracing around the embossing jar and cutting a half circle on the front vellum panel only. Then I'll go back to using my Crop-A-Dile and punch a really small hole onto my inserts. Put some twine in a bow on that so the recipient can easily pull it out, and this vellum pocket is so cute and so charming, and it is finished. And if you have made it to this point, thank you so much for watching. You are fabulous, you are beautiful, you are smart, and I hope you stick around for the next video.